John DeMartini. This is one of the most amazing and inspiring shows that you can listen into. If you want to be on the edge of your seats, if you want to open up your heart, if you want to expand your mind, and you want to meet incredible people, stay tuned, because you're just about to experience a transformative radio show that will change your life. And you're listening to the Dr. Pat Show that's coming up right next.
Welcome to the Dr. Pat Show. Talk radio to thrive by. Powerful, inspiring, and coming to you live, bringing you stories of people like you and me, busting through and living life full out. Get ready to dare to wonder what your life would be like if you knew you could not fail.
To the Dr. Pat Show. This is Talk Radio to Thrive By. I want to introduce you to my very, very special guest today. But I want to set the stage for it for a moment. You know, growing up as a kid in New York and then in New Jersey, I was surrounded by Mama number 2, Doris. And, you know, it's hard to imagine what it was like growing up in the middle, graduate of Plainfield High School in the middle of the riots in Plainfield High School. Fighting and protesting about a war, which I didn't understand, but also supporting the vets that came home from it. So important, so important. To this day, I support our vets. Understanding very little about the world at the time, but just knowing we could do better. But did we ever think we could do better with peace? This is the question. Did we ever think that there's a pathway that we could follow that would take us to a place that has a resonance and a frequency so very different than even what we feel about things? And when I grew up, as much as I don't really want to date myself, but I will, we had a sign for it. We called it a peace sign. But yet, those times were turbulent. Our protests were turbulent. People's lives were lost in turbulence. And we always would ask ourselves the question, was there another way? Now, here's what we want to say. I want to introduce you to my very special guest today, David Wick. And the reason I want to do this is because this is somebody that has the answers to most of the questions I've just asked. Not because you know, he got some academic degree, but because he's been doing it. And if you go back and you look at where he was in California, he was in California. I was completely on the other end of the country, right? We were two different places, but both of us were doing something. Now, I'm not going to talk about what I was doing because I don't know how to make sense or put an infrastructure on that. I just knew that I was raised by a mom who said there's another way. There can be another way. You have to always look for the other way, Pat. Now, she could have literally used the Einstein quote, you can't solve the problem at the level it was created, but I know David has. You know, with the staff of 8 and volunteers, and I'm telling you, volunteers in the world are the most precious of items you can imagine. And if you have never volunteered for anything in your life, go do it. But this is what he did. And he turned a story, I'm going to call it a story because he's going to tell you the rest. He turned a story into something strong, into something we could all learn from, into something that years go by and you ask yourself, are we moving the needle? He's published many books. One of my favorite topics ever to talk about is neurolinguistic programming, NLP. And we're not going to talk a whole lot about that today, but we might. But he's been a leader in organizing the celebration of International Day of Peace since 1984, International Day of Peace. And it's around the corner. Are we ready to honor that? David is a team leader of the Global Culture Peace Initiative, CPI, UN Designated Peace Messenger Initiative. I can go on and on and on, but I want you all to hear from him. David, thank you so much for joining me here today. You know, as September 21st lingers very shortly, almost like you can touch it, many of us pray that on that day, we can have a day of peace. Thank you for all that you do. Are you praying right along with us?
You bet. Definitely daily. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Pat. I'm truly delighted and honored to be here with you, and I thank you very much for what you say. And as you say, and as your wise mother said, there is another way. There's got to be another way. And absolutely, there is. There is, and it's called choice that we all make. And before we talk further about the International Day of Peace, which is, as you say, it is coming up Saturday, September 21st. Let me ask you a question. And you have created Transformative Talk Radio.
Yeah.
And would you tell me what the context is of that, the transformative? Because over the years, I was also very involved with organization development and other things, but there's a difference of transformation rather than change. I'm just wondering what the context is for you.
I'll tell you right out of the gate. First of all, I'm also the owner of the Transformation Network, which is the umbrella organization, which has many, many, many things we're building out for 2025. Transformation Talk Radio is one arm of it. And that was the arm that came to be 15 years ago, which we're celebrating. But I get asked that question a lot. And here's what I want to say about it. I wish I could tell you some phenomenal story that I woke up one day, I spent time with the Dalai Lama, although I did spend time with the Dalai Lama, but not that day. That I woke up one day and there I was. I was at the most depressed part of my life in 2002 and 2003. And people looked at me, David, like, why? So here's what happened. This is a long story. I'm going to make it really short. I was given the opportunity to go back to school after I lost my job. And I lost my job because I fought the system at AT&T. And I just told them, what you're doing is unconscionable. It was the second downsizing in the United States. And what they were doing and firing people 1 month from their full pension was unconscionable to me. It was just hard. There was nothing in my bones. Now, I just mentioned my mom, my second mom. So you can understand why something like that would just be unconscionable. And I was supposed to implement the program.
Wow.
So yeah. In AT&T, I was part of the divestiture team. I saw the good, the bad, and the ugly about change. Then I became a change management expert, known for change management. Then I went to school. And what I studied was never studied before between two people, but it was so important to me. The fancy word in organizational development and psychology, it's called psychological contracts. The academic term that I studied is psychological contract violation. In other words, broken promises.
Right.
I came at the end of that and I reflected on my life. And I really was stuck. I was so stuck, I created a word called unstuckable. But I didn't know how to go back into corporate America. I didn't know how to go back the way I was because I wasn't anymore. I wasn't the same. I was transformed, not changed. I was transformed. And what I mean by that, and this is my definition, and this is why I named the network the Transformation Network. We can change. We can stop eating ice cream late at night.
Right.
That's change. Or we can understand the spiritual nature, the body, mind, spiritual, holistic nature of every spoon of that ice cream we take at that moment, and lean into whether or not that's what our body, our mind, and our hearts and our spirit are asking for. See, the difference for me in change management and change is something that people will do for a short-term reward. Transformation is something you do for life. And when you do it for the betterment of yourself and the world. That's why transformation is the name of the network for me. What about you?
Well, I would say that exactly so. In terms of the transformation, it is a fundamental shift. It is a shift in, basically, we're talking about a shift in belief, belief in change in behavior, transformation of behavior or consciousness. And actually, all outer work begins from the inside, begins with the inner work. And we need to have both the outer and the inner work to evolve, to make the evolution that we all want. And just to give you a little bit of more perspective, I was part of Pathways to Peace, and this is the focal point we have here. The NGO Pathways to Peace has been working with the United Nations for many years. I joined in 1980 when it was just forming. And the co-founder, Avon Madison co-founded with a woman by the name of Joni Cardelli. And the whole focus was, well, actually, Avon had a vision when she was 4 years old of world peace, what that is, what that could be. And so it was, her pathway to create this. But anyhow, 1980, I joined the Pathways to Peace. And at the same time, I was also working in the corporate world. I worked at Levi Strauss, I worked at Stanford University, worked at Sun Microsystems, and I was doing management, executive development, or organizational change work, similar to what you were just talking about.
Yeah.
And but I was always working with what's the bridge between the two, peace building and the corporate world and the business world. And so coming back to Pathways to Peace and with the co-founder Avon Madison and working with the United Nations and other colleagues in 1981, helping to formulate and helping to pass the resolution, the United Nations resolution, it was Resolution 3637, creating the International Day of Peace. And so this was the point of creating the International Day of Peace, where there's a lot of people coming together, but fundamentally it is Peace Day provides a globally shared date for all humanity to commit to peace above all differences and contribute to building a culture of peace. So that's kind of the overarching focus, is building the culture of peace.
Yeah.
And that's very much what Pathways to Peace is about and has been about from the very beginning. So just share a little bit about Pathways to Peace. The mission, the vision is a world at peace. The mission is Pathways to Peace expands the understanding and expression of peace, fosters peace builders and peace building activities, and builds an integral movement for a culture of peace. Yeah. So there's a specific resolution also from the United Nations creating a resolution focused on creating a culture of peace. And that was in 1999. So that's really the overarching image and vision, is creating for all humanity a culture of peace. And where everyone is, where everyone lives and works, etc. The fundamental question, well, let me just go back. So 1981, the International Day of Peace was formulated. 1982, and this is for all humanity. This is supposed to come out for all civil society. And in 1982, they had a moment of silence in the General Assembly when they began their work, but that was it. And so we at Pathways to Peace go, holy cow, this is for all of humanity. This is supposed to come out. So we spent the next year, 1983, planning to create a major celebration of the International Day of Peace, which we did in San Francisco. And that was in 1984, the first major International Day of Peace celebration acknowledgement, working with other countries, the city of Assisi, and it became a significant event. But it was the first major United Nations International Day of Peace coming out. And part of that was, and we created at the time, at noontime, and many people early on were taking the moment of silence. At noontime is a moment of silence, minute of peace. And so it's just simply stopping for a minute and just being in that state of mindfulness about peace, what that means, what am I doing in my life, or just being quiet for a minute. And in San Francisco, it became a very big deal. Magnans, the majors, they stopped their cash registers for a minute.
I was there.
Oh, you were?
I was on a rotation, what they call a rotation. This was after the Bell system split. It's so fascinating. You're telling this story, and I'm like feeling, I had a hard hat on. I remember this like it was I forgot about this.
Really?
And I remember this like it was yesterday because I was on rotation. This was just after the phone company broke up, and now we had all of these, so they sent me to Pacific Tel in San Francisco on a rotation assignment. And I remember this. I was getting ready to go down a manhole. That's part of the rotation. I remember this, and I didn't have the context of it until much later. But I remember that AT&T and Pacific Tel must have participated in that. They had to. I don't know how they did, because we didn't have smartphones. We couldn't text.
Sure.
We didn't.
No, they did.
We didn't have that. It was like word of mouth, and you had to agree to it.
Free computer.
And I remember we were getting ready to go down a manhole because that was what I had to do in order to pass my rotation. And I remember the foreperson, it was a woman, the foreperson stopped us in the street. Really? Yes. And we had to stop. And I turned around to her and I said, I didn't know. I said, what are we doing? What's going on? And she said, be quiet.
Wow.
I never forgot that. And you're telling it, and I'm reflecting on that. I didn't put it together until you just said it, because I wasn't the person then I am now. But you're reflecting on it, and it seemed longer than a moment, but the whole street stopped. Was that your experience back there in San Francisco?
Yeah. And
like the street stopped.
Even KRON TV, the NBC affiliate, they stopped their programming for 1 minute, straight up noontime for a minute, and they just scrolled a quiet message about the International Day of Peace. Only time that's ever happened anywhere.
Wow.
Yeah, and
that was so powerful. How are you reflecting on that? Here we are today. How are we going to reflect on that and create that again for this Saturday?
Well, so the event in 1984 took place in the Civic Center Plaza in front of City Hall. Yep. This year, we are doing the same. We're having a major event. It's going to be at the Civic Center Plaza in City Hall from 10:30 a.m. to 4 p.m., and it has an amazing array of people who are going to be performers and speakers. And it's a major event. And the primary focus is, and the message is, you are a pathway to peace. Everybody is a pathway to peace. Everyone. And this is also going to be live streamed. This is going to be globally broadcast, live streamed. We have a partner, a media company in Canada, who is making the connection with Hiroshima. San Francisco is the hub. This is going to be the focal point, but it's connecting in with Hiroshima and New York, London, Geneva, other cities who are going to be celebrating the International Day of Peace. And so the programming is going to be shown in and out. And actually, people can go to the Pathways to Peace website, pathwaystopeace.org, altogether, pathwaystopeace.org, and look at the International Day of Peace button. And there's a place to register to get the link for the broadcast itself. So anyone anywhere can participate with watching the broadcast and have information there. Or if you're in San Francisco in the Bay Area, come on down, because it's going to be really a neat event.
There's nothing like it. Let me just say to people.
Yeah.
There's nothing quite like it. You asked me about the Transformation Network and why that came to me and how it came to me. I only have one answer for you. It was gifted to me by the God of my understanding. Whatever you want to call that, whoever's listening, that's my term from being 34 years in recovery. And that was a gift for me. But all of the influences I had, especially my trip to San Francisco, changed me.
Wow.
It changed me, David. I don't know how to say this, but maybe you can understand. Maybe you can explain this better than I could. I had never been to San Francisco. I was leading the charge on the East Coast the best I could about AIDS and AIDS awareness. But this dropped in my hat, and it was a full month. It wasn't just like a couple days. It was full month. And we were down, I call it downtown. I don't know where, for me, San Francisco's enormous. So when we say downtown, we were clearly in a district that had most of the buildings, et cetera, et cetera. So we were very close to that event that day.
Yes, you were. That's amazing.
Very close. And I, to be honest with you, I think they were working on the lines for that event at that time. I think that's why we were there. But they, I'm in rotation. But here's what I want to say. We need more of this. Yes. We need more of this. Because the kind of change that touches you, it's one of the pillars of transformation for me. It's the moment that change pierces your heart. Mm-hmm. I don't know how I need to say it. We go through a lot of other changes, right? We get our hair cut. We go through change, whatever you want, change jobs. But there's a moment that there is a situation or an event in your life, and it pierces your heart in a way you're not the same anymore. And I think what you're talking about has such transformative power. And I'm glad you're live streaming it. Is it possible for people to go to pathwaystopeace.org and watch the stream? How is that possible there? Can you tell us?
At this point, the only connecting in is to register.
Okay.
And then you'll get and part of that is due to security. Because there are other changes, just pump out the URL, the link. There's some, bad actors out there. So
yes, there are.
Yeah. So, and we're working on having another vehicle to be able to plug into. So, yes. And so let me
please
further here and about, the change and transformation and evolution, because we are in evolution. And people say, well, my God, the world is falling apart. Yeah, there are people who are doing some terrible things. There's, many things that are being very, very difficult. And there's a larger picture, as you had mentioned, that we are in evolution. And the fundamental of the United Nations, let me just read to you, the preamble of UNESCO, that's the Educational Society, the UN Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. And the preamble is, since wars begin in the minds of men and women, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. So we come back to the very old saying, as you think, so you become. So it really comes back to our thinking and the choices that we make. So that's why we say you are a pathway to peace. Everyone is a pathway to peace. It's by the choices that we make. It's what we're doing within ourselves, our own practices to live to our higher values and to be more conscious, be more compassionate, be more understanding, more inclusive in the world, because there's always going to be conflict on one level or another, because we live in the 3D world. We live in where there's dichotomy. So there's always going to be difference, but it's how we deal with that, how we work with those changes, how we give each other room to be different. And so that's a big part of what we're doing, is raising our own awareness of the choices that we make. And there are also definite activities, which I'm sure that you talk about on your show, that people can take in the programs, but about being more conscious and being more loving, but it is also being strong and calling out when things are not right. And there's got to be pieces with justice. There's got to be justice, with what is happening in the world. So let me share with you one of our dear colleagues, Willis Harmon, and he was a good visionary and worked as a professor at Stanford University and also the president of the Institute of Nordic Sciences. And he said, we are living through one of the most fundamental shifts in history, a change in the actual belief structure of Western society. No economic, political, or military power can compare with the power of a change of mind. By deliberately changing their images of reality, people are changing the world. So, and that's taking place. We're in evolution, and it's a long journey. But the point is, what am the choices I'm making in my life, in my relationships, my home, how am I working with my relationships, or really coming from a very selfish and reactive place, or where I work. I mean, with your wonderful transformation network, you're in many relationships. Well, how are you treating the other people, or the environment that you're creating?
Yeah.
Or our community where we live, and so it just goes out making the choices that we make, and we are also examples for other people. People, whether we know it or not, people look at us and we have an influence. And it's really about making those choices. And I'm sure that, like you said, many of your guests are, talking along this line. So there are different practices to help us get into that space.
Yeah, I love what you're talking about. Let me just say something that I want to reflect on something you just said. But let's take a short break. When we come back, what we're going to talk about is something that David just said. David Wick, my very special guest, and what he said today. And this is so important and so misunderstood. And then we're going to talk about one of my favorite things to do, just beyond belief. At night when I go to bed, I have one of these lit electronically, albeit. But I have one lit every night on my dresser before I go to bed. Why is that? When we come back, we're going to talk about the beautiful energy integration of peace and powerful stance for justice. They can coexist, folks. When we come back, we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about also essays for peace and so much more. Mark your calendar. September 21st, mark the calendar. Make sure that you know that there is a place you can go. We just gave it. Let me say it again. pathwaystopeace.org. There's an International Day of Peace, 40th anniversary. And when we come back, We're going to talk about how do you do that? How do you keep yourself in check? Just because I am the owner, founder of the Transformation Network, I am also human. I'm a work in progress. I work on who I am. I don't do it perfectly, but I strive to do it. When we come back, are you ready to commit to that thing that's within you, to take one step for yourself to bring peace into your life? Let's take a short break, everybody. We'll be right back. Was gifted to us by Nick Johnson. It was a song written beautifully by him, and his let's just call it his group while he was going to school. It's beautiful. And you know, you hear the word someday, some way. You hear her say that over and over and over again. Someday, some way. Over and over and over again in that song. What is she really singing about? David Wick is joining me here today. Pathways to Peace, a minute of silence and a moment of peace. This is a special guest for my show, but it's about a special moment. And David said this earlier. I want to say it again. You know, each and every one of us, myself including, I can't blame my past for who I am. I can't blame my parents, although I've done enough of that. I certainly could pick on the society, the world, but the buck has got to stop here with me. There are some days that I think, wow, did I just say that to Emily? Oh my God, I need to apologize for that. Because we're all works in progress. But I want to tell you what I want to talk to you about peace. You have to be awake enough. I don't know a better word, David. Maybe you can help me with this. But you have to be awake enough to really contemplate the idea there's another way. Now, myself and Mark, we interviewed the youngest parliamentary member in the Ukraine when the war first started. You know, we had conversations with them early on in the game. I've interviewed Congress people about what are you doing to help our vets. I've gotten criticism for that because some people think that I can't be on the side of peace and support our vets. I'm not sure where we come up with these ideas, David, but I'm telling you, that's not me.
Right.
But let's talk about this idea that you mentioned before. Of course, you are asked to stand up for what you believe in the way of justice. I do. But it's not what you do. I think we're talking about how we do it. Isn't that true?
That's right. Those are the choices that we make.
Yeah. Now, clearly as a kid, I was right there marching for women's rights. There was no question. I mean, people that stood up at the podium and talked about it. I watched the infighting in the National Organization of Women when Gloria Steinem said that lesbians should be included. I watched them come to a peaceful agreement. In the world we live in, what do we want to help people set for themselves for this coming Saturday and beyond? What do we want their highest intention and choice if we had our way with that?
Yeah, I think it is very much what is the highest and best they want for themselves, for their family, for the community. What is the kind of world that we want to live in? And having that, you know, what is the vision? And I also have a dear colleague, his name is David Gershon, and he has, are you familiar with David?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, and his focus is on peace on earth by 2030.
Yep.
And there's a way to move forward in practical ways, and this is about the learning different values and living different values that we have, but it's making the choice, and it is also having the attraction of people saying, I want that, as opposed to hitting someone over the head and saying, you got to believe this, or this is the way, or this is, but it's really how to inspire and draw people to what is the highest and best that people want, and step forward and really engage in that. So it all are needed in terms of moving our evolution. But it is very much, again, so there's what we're dealing with right now. There's a larger evolution. You've mentioned a couple times about vibration or resonance or
frequency.
Frequency,
yeah.
right? And what do you mean by frequency when you say that?
I believe they're a frequency. So somebody handed me a book a long time ago by Hawkins, Power versus Force. And they handed me that book, almost to say, you better read this because you need to shape up, Pat. That's why I got the book. Okay. Not because they thought I was going to do anything great with it, but they also knew I grew up not being able to read and write. I was basically illiterate most of my life. And I got that book and I put it down, but the title of the book got my attention, Power versus Force. It was the first time that I got a sense of an energy of a frequency of emotion in his scale. That there were these distinctions between joy, peace, love, and the rest, and fear. And it's a frequency. If you study Morimoto's work, I've interviewed these people, Dr. Emoto, I've interviewed Ushi Haramoto. I've interviewed pretty much in 20 years just about anybody. We sponsored the movie What the Bleep.
Oh, okay.
But I knew nothing about this. See, I didn't come to this game knowing this.
No, I got it. What about heart math? Have you heard of heart math?
Exactly, heart math. Yes. All of the above. Jay-Z Knight talking about every day you can create your reality. What'd you say? And so I was so like a sponge, and I didn't have any rules, David. For me, I started something that is now known as the positive centric movement in media. That doesn't mean we're just all Pollyanna people. We have some shows that deal with racism straight up.
Yeah.
We're going to be launching a political channel. But it's the way that we're doing it. And that's what I mean by frequency. We could do a show today and we could be so angry, hateful, and that's a frequency. Or we can attempt to engage and understand each other. That's what I'm talking about.
Absolutely, that is true, and it is also an energy. It is energetic.
It's an energy.
It is part of our consciousness.
Yep.
And so just to kind of move in this line, the one thing that we can do that everybody can do, anyone can do, at 12 noon every day. Just take a moment. You don't have to take a whole minute. But that's great too. But just take a moment. Just take a few seconds. I have it on my watch, or have it, and just take a moment and just be quiet for a minute, or just contemplate, what I'm grateful for in this minute. But just take that moment of being aware, and that's something that we can all do, and that helps. I mean, it helps us be more conscious of wanting peace. Or living peace in our world. So another aspect of this is a bigger picture that I was inspired with when I was a young man, and fundamentally this captures a lot by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, where he said, "You are not a human being in search of a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being immersed in a human experience." So we are in this world, and it is all also by vibration, energetic. So there, as I mentioned, Willis Harman, he has a book called Global Mind Change, and how there is a major evolution that's taking place, and it's on an energetic level. And it's also by, making choices in consciousness, in making the choices, daily There's also, I've heard of Dr. Jude Currivan, Currivan, and she's a physicist, cosmologist, and done a tremendous amount of work on consciousness and how there is an energetic shift that is taking place. And we all contribute to that by our choices, our thinking. But there is a big shift that is taking place in the long term that is making a difference in the world. So we're part of making that change. Just to let you know, there's also, with Pathways Peace, we're also part of at the UN, there's a new entity, it's a structure within the UN. It's called the Unitive Cluster. Mm-hmm. And it's being there to help bring experience and awareness of unity, that we are fundamentally, we are in a unified relationship, in a unified field. And it's making the choices that we make. So that's where you're coming back to what you're saying. You are working with people who are deep into what are the choices you make. And it's a challenge. I mean, it's always a challenge for all of us. That's why there are different practices to help us keep on track or to learn and grow. Your thoughts?
I love this. I want to tell you, I have to give credit to Dr. Jean Houston. I forgot to do this. When I first started the Dr. Pat Show, it wasn't called that. It was called Crust Busting Your Way to an Awesome Life, because I was so crusted over in my life. I dialed the wrong phone number. That's why you and I are here. But I said yes. I made choices, and I'm here today. And I remember interviewing Dr. Jean, and she was just beginning her leadership group. And I was one of the first people to be able to be in that first leadership group.
Oh, really?
And I never had experienced anything quite like that in my life. I mean, I had been on Vision Quest. It started in 1997 on a Vision Quest with a woman, Sidonia Cahill, and Sebastopol. And that was life-changing for me. And it was one step at a time, which helped transform me. But Dr. Jean, going to that workshop with Angela Sarian, with Donna Eden, with some of the top people, and 10 days immersed in that, out of that came the vision. Right? Now, it's taken me a few years to have the technology, but I'll tell you what poem I give young people in recovery. I'll tell you the poem. I have them read out loud individually and then as a group. It's a poem by Rumi, and it's on Beyond Ideas of Wrongdoing and Right Doing. There is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in the grass, right? And the world is too full to talk about, because this is how young, old, anywhere in between people feel about recovery, about walking away and want a better life. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other, right, doesn't make any sense. This is what Rumi's saying, you see? See, this is what you and I are talking about.
Exactly.
This is what don't go back. So then Rumi says, the breeze at dawn, talks about the breeze at dawn, has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. Don't go back to sleep, David. See, I think we've gone back to sleep a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. That's part of the journey of individuals, as you're saying, and also humanity.
Yeah.
How we continue to evolve. And just as an aside, I lived in the Bay Area for most of my life, and then in 2003 I moved to Ashland, Oregon, where I am. Jean Houston.
We're Jean down the street.
Yeah, she's local here. We know each other. There's
nobody like Dr. Jean Houston.
Pardon?
There's nobody quite like Dr. Jean Houston.
No, for sure. I mean, with her life experience and her great intellect and capacity, and she's an amazing person, for sure. So, and I love what you're saying, because working with people in addiction, because that's like all of us. It's what are the choices that we make? And creating peace is like when people say, well, there's never going to be peace. Well, we live in relative peace. How we choose our lives. That's creating peace. Yeah. Peace in our world. Peace in our world and on my sphere that I live within, my sphere of influence, I make those choices.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, I use the same poem when I do executive coaching. That's how I decide whether or not we're going to work together.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's the first thing we do. I mean, think about it. CEO of a top, Fortune 50 company, and he has to recite, or she has to recite Rumi.
Yeah.
And, I'd say I got about a 99% okay rate with that. Every once in a while, there's somebody that says, I ain't reading this. I said, okay, I'll send you my buddy. He can be your coach.
Right.
But why? Why would I pick something like this? Why? Because it's personal to me and it's a reminder for me.
Right.
It's a reminder for me. I worked in corporate America at a very turbulent time. This was the time that you hear a lot of reference about now in the political arena, the time of affirmative action, right?
Right.
And I worked for one of the largest companies that knew they had to take that on, AT&T.
Yeah.
And we were at a bottleneck. Do you know what we did, David?
What?
We were at a bottleneck. Linda, who's also here, she was the head of diversity. We both had director jobs. But with one of the teams we were on, and I can't remember if it was the LGBTQ team, I can't remember which team it was. They were done. They were so tired of all of the traditional ways to bring people together. Do you know what they did? Somebody came up with an idea to have a food festival.
Wonderful.
A major food festival, and everybody brought the food from their culture.
Fabulous.
I have never seen anything change perspective and people.
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot now.
Yeah.
People that didn't even talk to each other were invited over to somebody's house for tikka masala or something, right? Or Brazilian food or Chinese food or hamburgers. It was so transformative. That's frequency to me. That's a frequency.
Absolutely. And it's a shift in, how we, look at each other, think about each other, and just, that becomes a great opening and a shared experience. It's just like, hey, I'm not angry about this. I love it. That's a very good example.
And I want to end the show because I mentioned a symbol that's been very important to me all my life. I have to say, probably being brought up Catholic had something to do with it. I grew up lighting candles in church. And when my mom died at age 6, the candle became an important symbol for me. But the candle is also an important symbol for what we're talking about today, isn't it?
Oh, mighty. And we haven't gotten to that. We have an internationally known artist, and who's going to, on the LED screens around the city, he's going to have his candle. And that has become the symbol of the PeaceWave. So the internet, the moment of silence is now known as a PeaceWave around the world. And the burning candle on LED screens is that symbol. Yes.
Thank you, David, so much. Please let people know how they can find out more about this, how they can become involved, how they can, engage others, how they can have conversations. What's the best place for people to go to find out more about all of this? And thank you for everything you're doing.
Well, the pathwaystopeace.org for certain. And I can be also reached at davidwick111 at gmail.com. We're in a great stage of evolution. Yeah, and so a lot is happening and a lot more is coming.
Yeah. You know how I know we're capable of it? This is not a political statement. This is an observation and a psychological statement.
Yeah.
I watched in my close circle and other people, I watched them go from about 2 months ago, despair, despicable, depressed. And I watched them shift by following a woman that came out of nowhere, right? It doesn't matter what political party you're at, but it's an energy. And that energy is called optimism.
Yep.
That's what we have to have around peace. Never lose optimism.
For sure. Absolutely.
David, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here with you. And thank you.
And I just want to end with this. Optimism, please, David and I said this 5 times today. Optimism doesn't mean you don't stand up for what you believe in.
No.
Look at Greta Thunberg. Optimism doesn't mean that when you see an atrocity happening to a neighbor across the street, you don't do something about it. You can still be optimistic, but the choices you make for how you live in the world, what you believe in, and how you go about your life, that's where the ball is in your court. Thank you all for tuning us in and turning us on. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.